Right now, the notion of peace seems like a foreign concept. It's hard to have peace when we have to deal with the pandemic of COVID, the pandemic of police brutality, the pandemic of racism, and the reality that hate is being legislated from the White House. There's a story in scripture about how the disciples were on a boat and there was a major storm coming. The disciples were very afraid and Jesus was asleep in the boat. I'd say that's where some of us feel like we are in the middle of a storm. When I think about how my grandmother and forebears who saw the dogs and felt the fire hoses in the 1950s and 60s, I remember how resolute their faith was and is. And despite being on that boat, my forebears knew, as James Cone and others have said, that God is on the side of the oppressed. We have solidarity with each other, that we don't struggle alone, and that, as King says, over time, the world's moral arc will bend towards justice. Just like the concept of peace seems miles away, so does the idea of unity. What is unity and how can we accomplish it? It seems like people are so different ideologically that it would be near impossible to come together. But what I would say is that what unites marginalized people, especially people of color who are suffering, is that we are all human together. We've all felt the weight of oppression on our backs. Moreover, we are all made in the image of God, as is everyone else, with a mind to reason, to love, and to be loved. These are basic characteristics that have been overlooked by people who choose to oppress. But unity looks like breaking through those barriers of isms with the impossible power of mutual love and solidarity so that we can see God in each other and demand to be treated as such. Unity then comes in the struggle for life and justice. We've had some leaders rising up from all over the place. I'm thinking specifically of Tamika Mallory. You can Google her. She's a force of nature, and she really practices what she preaches. Tamika is an example of what it means to lift up the voices of those who have been previously silenced. She's a Black woman who is leading a major movement against Black death. She's also one of the founders of the women's movement. We should take a page out of her book. Speak up for those who have no voices. Put our bodies literally on the line for justice and tell the truth. No more sugarcoating. We have to speak truth to power. I think it is also particularly important that we see leadership not just as the person whose name is in lights. We also have to think about the reality that we have the responsibility to lead in our homes, and particularly for our white siblings. How are you raising your kids? What are you reading to dismantle injustice? Have you listened to the experience of that Black friend without immediately discounting it? We must lift up our voices like trumpets and lead, especially in the face of a despotic leader in the White House. Promoting tolerance, as this term is traditionally used, is an interesting concept. We as people of color do not need to keep begging people to tolerate us. By doing so, we approximate ourselves to the white supremacist hierarchy. How much of me can you take? When has my body crossed the line for you? You see how it places my body at the disposal of someone else's gaze, right? What we should do instead is to lift up and build up those in the world who have just been tolerated, people of color, queer people, etc. We have to build up those people and teach them and us together that we are worthy of being more than tolerated. We are worthy of full lives filled with love and compassion. In the midst of a loveless world, I think that is our responsibility, to show love as we have been loved by God, knowing that evil cannot win and that eventually love wins.